Clarence Miles had earned a quiet kind of respect around Stallworth Global, though most people never realized it. For almost 20 years, he'd been the janitor who arrived before sunrise and left long after the executives had gone home. He was the man who fixed leaky pipes when no one else was around, unclogged drains during holiday weekends, and wiped muddy footprints from marble floors that cost more than his monthly paycheck. But he didn't complain. He didn't envy. He didn't even raise his voice. He just worked with a calm, steady dignity that people rarely noticed, until the day everything changed. That day began with a storm, the kind that rattles windows and makes the whole city feel restless. Wind slapped the glass walls of the skyscraper, and employees rushed into the building with wet coats, frizzy hair, and jittery energy. Something was wrong. They could feel it before anyone said a word. By 7:30 a.m., the rumor had spread. The billionaire himself, Donovan Stallworth, was coming in. And he was furious. Normally, Stallworth preferred video calls from his penthouse office 2 cities away. He hated commuting, hated traffic, hated anything that wasted time. So if he was coming in person, it meant one thing. A disaster was brewing. And everyone knew what it was. The company's brand new financial AI, a multimillion-dollar system meant to impress foreign investors, had crashed overnight. It didn't simply malfunction, it wiped crucial files, scrambled numbers, and locked out entire departments. The emergency meeting with international investors was at noon. Without the system, the deal was dead. And everyone knew it. Employees scurried around, pale and panicked. IT sprinted between floors. Managers shouted into phones. Even the security guards seemed stressed. In the middle of this chaos, Clarence quietly mopped the marble hallway on the 18th floor. No rush. No panic. Just slow, steady strokes of the mop. He had seen storms come and go: financial storms, emotional storms, executive storms. They all felt the same. He simply kept his floor clean. That was his job. Then the elevator dinged. Out stepped Donovan Stallworth himself, a tall, sharp-jawed man with silver hair and a presence that sucked the oxygen out of a room. His suit was immaculate. His expression? Furious. People scattered like he was a walking hurricane. "Where is IT?" he snapped at his assistant. "They're still trying to reboot the system, sir." "Trying?" Stallworth barked. "Tell them I don't pay for trying. I pay for solutions." He stormed forward until he nearly tripped over the yellow caution sign in front of Clarence. Water pooled across the floor where Clarence had been cleaning. "Move this," Stallworth demanded. "I don't have time for detours." Clarence looked up with a soft, polite smile. "Morning, sir. Floor's wet. Wouldn't want you to slip." The billionaire stared at him, stunned that a janitor would slow him down. "Do you know who I am?" Stallworth snapped. Clarence nodded. "Yes, sir. But wet is still wet." Gasps rippled through the hallway. 2 interns froze mid-step. Stallworth's assistant quietly mouthed, "Oh no. Are you lecturing me about a floor?" Stallworth growled, stepping dangerously close. Clarence kept mopping, calm as a Sunday morning. "No, sir. Just doing my job." Stallworth scoffed, his voice rising. "I run a multibillion-dollar company. I have a crisis to fix. I don't have time to let a janitor tell me where I can walk." Clarence stopped. He lifted his eyes, gentle, firm, unafraid. And he spoke the sentence that froze the billionaire in place. "Maybe that's the problem, sir. You think titles matter more than floors that need cleaning." Silence slammed into the hallway like a dropped piano. For the first time anyone could remember, Donovan Stallworth had nothing to say. Clarence continued, his voice steady. "A leader who won't look down to see what's right in front of him eventually slips on what he refused to notice." The words hung heavy in the air. Stallworth blinked as if someone had pulled the rug out from beneath his ego. His mouth opened slightly but no reply came. The billionaire who dominated boardrooms, speechless before a janitor. His assistant looked like she might faint. Clarence simply stepped aside and pointed to the dry area. "You can pass now, sir." Stallworth walked around the wet floor, silent, shaken, almost humbled but refusing to show it. Clarence returned to his mopping as if nothing had happened. But everyone else felt the shift. People whispered about it within minutes. That janitor talked back to Stallworth. And Stallworth couldn't respond. That line, did he prepare that? That was deep. But Clarence hadn't meant to embarrass anyone. He just told the truth. What he didn't know was that truth was sharper than any executive report, louder than any boardroom argument, and more revealing than any AI system. Because buried beneath the billionaire's anger was a flaw one Clarence had unknowingly described perfectly. And within hours, Stallworth would discover that flaw. And realize Clarence wasn't just a janitor. He was the only person in the building who understood what was really happening. By the time Donovan Stallworth returned to the office after his silent hallway encounter, something inside him had shifted. He couldn't stop replaying Clarence's words. "Maybe that's the problem, sir. You think titles matter more than floors that need cleaning." He had brushed it off at first, as if a janitor's comment was just background noise. But now, the words gnawed at him like an itch he couldn't reach. He had spent decades climbing, conquering, and commanding, yet here was a man he'd never noticed before, speaking a truth he couldn't ignore. And the truth was simple: Stallworth Global was failing because someone had stopped noticing the small things, the things that actually kept the empire running. He stormed into the IT department. Monitors flickered, alarms beeped, and employees were frantically typing, muttering, and pressing buttons. "Sir," one of the IT leads stammered, "we've tried everything. The AI is corrupted. All the financial data from last quarter is scrambled. If we don't restore it, the investors' meeting." "I know," Stallworth snapped. His mind wasn't on the data. It was on Clarence. He remembered how the janitor had calmly mopped, unafraid, and how he had dared to speak truth. And then it clicked. Perhaps the AI failure wasn't just a technical problem. Perhaps it was human oversight. Perhaps someone had ignored the simplest steps, the ones no title or status could replace. He turned to his assistant. "Where's Clarence Miles?" "The janitor." The assistant blinked. He's on the 18th floor." "Why?" "Bring him here. Now." Moments later, Clarence entered the chaos of the server room. He was quiet, calm, carrying nothing but a small notebook tucked under his arm. The IT team froze. Stallworth's jaw tightened. This was the man who had stopped him in the hallway. "Sir," Clarence said politely, "you asked for me." Stallworth swallowed hard, struggling to speak. "Yes. I don't know if you can help, but the AI, it's down. Everything's down. We could lose the deal. Do you understand this system?" Clarence nodded slowly. "I've watched it for months. I've noticed small inconsistencies, patterns the system shouldn't produce. Some files weren't uploaded correctly because the old manual logs weren't transferred. The AI thinks it's complete, but it isn't." The room went silent. The IT lead's eyes widened. "Wait, are you saying the problem isn't the AI? It's missing input?" Clarence smiled faintly. "Exactly. The system has everything it needs, except for what was never entered properly. I kept the old logs. If we cross-check them with the AI, we can restore the data before noon." Stallworth stared. He wanted to yell, to demand why no one had done this sooner. But instead, he felt something rare: relief. "Show me," he said. Clarence opened his notebook, carefully flipping to a section labeled Manual Financial Logs 2024 Q1 Q4. The room crowded around him, incredulous at the level of detail. Every figure, every transaction, every adjustment, the janitor had kept a record of it all, not because it was required, but because he noticed. He cared. "You kept these?" Stallworth asked, voice low. Clarence nodded. "Yes, sir. I figured someday someone might need them. I didn't think it would be me in a boardroom explaining it." Stallworth's heart pounded. He had never met anyone like Clarence. Not in all the years of hiring consultants, analysts, and specialists. No title could compare to diligence, foresight, and honesty. By 10 a.m., thanks to Clarence's meticulous notes, the AI system was patched. The data was restored. Graphs were corrected. Presentations rebuilt. Investors would see a flawless report, exactly what Stallworth had been promised before the crisis hit. And all it took was listening to a janitor. As the IT team filed reports, Stallworth approached Clarence quietly. "I owe you an explanation, and a thank you. You just saved this company." Clarence shrugged. "Just doing my job, sir. You asked for the truth, I gave it." For Stallworth, the lesson was clear: titles and authority meant nothing if you ignored the people who actually made the work happen. And sometimes, the smallest voice carries the loudest message. Later, in the quiet of his office, Stallworth stared at the city skyline. His empire had been shaken, almost broken, by oversight. And yet, it had been saved by someone he'd overlooked for 20 years. Someone who dared to speak truth when no one else would. And he knew, without a doubt, that the world and his company would never be the same. By late morning, Stallworth Global had transformed from a building of chaos into a hive of quiet determination. The AI system was running again, data restored, and investors' presentations rebuilt, all thanks to one man who nobody had noticed for years, Clarence Miles. The irony wasn't lost on Donovan Stallworth. Here he was, a billionaire, facing one of the most important moments of his career, and the person who saved him was the janitor who had mopped the hallway and dared to speak the truth. Stallworth had never been in a situation like this before. Typically, he gave orders and expected obedience. Today, he had to admit something uncomfortable: he didn't know everything. And he never would if he ignored the people who actually kept the company running. "Clarence," Stallworth said, his voice calmer than usual, "I think it's time you showed the board what you can do." Clarence blinked. "Sir, I'm just a janitor." "Not today," Stallworth replied, his eyes sharp. "Today, you're the one who saved our entire company. And it's your turn to speak." Reluctantly, Clarence followed Stallworth to the boardroom. As they entered, the room fell silent. Investors and executives looked up, confused. They had heard whispers about a janitor stepping in, but none of them had imagined he would be here, standing in front of them. Stallworth gestured toward him. "This is Clarence Miles." Clarence noticed something none of us did. He noticed what was missing and how it affected the entire system. And thanks to him, the deal is back on track. Clarence cleared his throat, feeling the weight of dozens of eyes on him. He glanced at Stallworth for a reassuring nod, then began. "Good morning, everyone. I know you were expecting a typical presentation. I also know that systems can fail, numbers can disappear, and technology isn't perfect. But human diligence, simple observation can save the day. I've kept manual logs of the company's finances for years, and it turns out that cross-checking them with the AI system restored the missing data. Everything you see in these reports is accurate." He opened his notebook, projecting charts and figures onto the boardroom screen. The room fell into an awed silence. Investors leaned forward. Executives whispered. Nobody had expected this. Stallworth watched, amazed. Every word Clarence spoke was precise, confident, and calm. His knowledge of the company was staggering, not because of fancy titles, but because he had paid attention to the small details everyone else ignored. When he finished, one of the senior investors stood and clapped slowly. "I've been in this business for over 30 years, the man said, and I've never seen someone without a formal title save a deal this big. Incredible work." Another executive nodded. This changes how we look at internal operations. We can't overlook the people who are actually running the company from the ground up. Clarence kept his eyes low, but Stallworth felt a surge of pride. This was his company, his empire, but it was also a lesson in humility. The man who had mopped his floors and spoken truth had become the hero of the hour. After the meeting, Stallworth pulled Clarence aside. "You realize," he said, "that you just taught every one of these executives the most important lesson of their careers." Clarence shook his head. "I just did what I thought was right, sir. I didn't expect this." "Expect nothing less from yourself again," Stallworth replied. "You've earned a seat at this company's table, Clarence. Not because of a title, but because of what you do." Word spread quickly throughout Stallworth Global. By lunchtime, everyone knew the janitor had saved the company. Whispers turned into murmurs, murmurs turned into admiration. People who had ignored Clarence for decades suddenly wanted to shake his hand, ask him questions, and even take notes from him. Clarence returned to his mop and bucket later that afternoon, but something had changed. He wasn't invisible anymore. People didn't just see him, they respected him. And Stallworth? He couldn't stop thinking about the truth in Clarence's words, the simple yet profound observation that had shifted the balance of power. "You think titles matter more than floors that need cleaning." That sentence had done more than stop a billionaire in his tracks. It had reminded everyone in the building that real value isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's quiet, steady, and right under your nose. As Clarence finished his shift and prepared to leave for the day, Stallworth stopped him. "Tomorrow, you're joining me in the executive briefing. And next week, I want you mentoring our IT team. You've earned it." Clarence's jaw dropped. "Me? Mentoring executives?" Stallworth smiled. "Yes. Today, you were the hero. Tomorrow, you'll be the teacher." Clarence looked around the now quiet building, realizing for the first time that a janitor's work and a single sentence spoken with courage could change the destiny of an entire empire. And for the first time in his life, he felt what it was like to be truly seen. The next morning, Clarence arrived at Stallworth Global to find something unusual. The building buzzed with a different energy. People whispered his name not with skepticism, but with respect. Interns nodded politely, managers offered handshakes, and even the usually cold executives smiled, albeit cautiously. Clarence carried his mop and bucket as usual, expecting nothing more than another ordinary day. But Donovan Stallworth had other plans. "Clarence," Stallworth called from his office doorway, "come in." Inside the office, the billionaire's skyline view looked different today. Perhaps it was the sunlight filtering in, or perhaps it was Stallworth's unusually calm demeanor. He gestured toward a chair. "I've been thinking," Stallworth began, "about yesterday, the crisis, and about you." Clarence shifted uneasily. "Sir, I just did what I thought was right." "No," Stallworth interrupted, leaning forward. "What you did was extraordinary. You didn't just save a company. You reminded me and everyone here what true diligence, honesty, and courage look like. You spoke one sentence, and it changed everything." Clarence kept his eyes down, but Stallworth wasn't finished. "I want to make you an official part of the company. Not just as a consultant or advisor, but as my personal operations strategist. You'll oversee internal audits, mentor teams, and ensure that we never ignore the details that matter most." "And yes," he said, handing Clarence an envelope, This includes compensation that reflects your value. Clarence's hands shook as he opened it. Inside was a contract, an offer of a salary and benefits that dwarfed his janitorial pay by hundreds of times. But more than the money, it was the recognition, the validation, the proof that the work he had quietly done for decades had finally been seen. He looked up at Stallworth, eyes wide. I don't know what to say. Say you'll help us do better, Stallworth replied. Say you'll teach us to pay attention to the people who make this company run. That's what matters most. For the rest of the day, Clarence walked through the building like a different man. Employees who had ignored him for years now stopped to shake his hand or ask for advice. The interns, wide-eyed, hung on every word he spoke. Even the executive team, usually so arrogant, treated him with a mix of awe and respect. But the biggest reward wasn't the title, the money, or even the admiration. It was the understanding that his years of quiet dedication, years that had gone unnoticed, finally mattered. He had spoken one sentence, and it had frozen a billionaire in his tracks. Now, that sentence had changed not only the company's future but his own. Later that evening, as the city lights glimmered against the glass walls of Stallworth Global, Clarence stood in the lobby, mop in hand. He looked around at the building he had maintained for decades, feeling a profound sense of accomplishment. It wasn't about wealth. It wasn't about recognition. It was about being seen, being valued, and knowing that doing the right thing even when nobody notices can change everything. Stallworth walked up beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. You know, he said, I've built empires, signed billion-dollar deals, and thought I understood leadership. But yesterday, I learned more from you than all my years of business school combined. Clarence smiled faintly. Sometimes, the right people just need someone to notice the work they do. Stallworth nodded. Not sometimes. Always. And now, the world will notice you. The janitor who had once been invisible, overlooked, and underestimated had become the man who saved a billionaire's empire, taught a boardroom a lesson in humility, and proved that courage and diligence, quiet as they may be, carry more power than titles ever could. As he left the building that night, the city skyline reflecting his triumph, Clarence realized something profound. One sentence, spoken with honesty, can freeze the world in silence, and then set it on fire. And from that day forward, nobody at Stallworth Global ever ignored a janitor or a voice of truth again.